Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you were handed just a massive stack of foundational notes.
Like hundreds of pages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hundreds of pages of intricate diagrams, historical timelines, mythological Bibles, but this isn't for an ancient religion.
Right, or a historical textbook.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
What we have here is a complete, ground-up concept development for a universe that is currently in active development.
It's a completely original, evolving intellectual property.
Right, called Devolutia 2666. And it is, without a doubt, just an absolute masterclass in world building. So, welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today we have a truly fascinating mission. We get to take you, our listener, right into the engine room of a creator's imagination.
We are looking at a cosmology built from absolute scratch.
From the ground up, where every single monster, every magic system, every alternate dimension, and every dystopian sci-fi concept has a deeply reasoned, interconnected origin.
It's definitely not just a collection of cool ideas thrown together.
Right. It is a rigorous structural architecture of imagination, and we are going to explore it piece by piece today.
It really is a staggering achievement in conceptual design, especially knowing this is an active work in progress.
Yeah, that's the wild part.
Right, because when you look at most fantasy or sci-fi universes, they often rely on a standard, good versus evil narrative.
Sure. Like, there's a Dark Lord, a hero of light, a clash of morality.
Exactly. But what we are looking at today actively rejects that binary.
It throws it right out the window.
It does. Instead, the creator has built this entire reality on a cosmic tension between two opposing, entirely neutral forces.
Okay, so neutral forces. Break that down for us.
Well, on one side, we have what the source material calls masculine force,
Okay.
which represents structure, order, permanence, rigid geometry, and definition.
And on the opposing side?
On the opposing side, we have feminine flow, which represents dissolution, evolution, intuition, emotion, and continuity.
Got it. So the entire universe of Devolutia 2666, with all its horrors and wonders, is simply the result of these two forces colliding.
Colliding, suppressing one another, and ultimately trying to find balance.
Right. And before we get completely lost in the cosmic weeds here, we need to make something explicitly clear to you about the terminology we're going to be using today.
Yes, very important.
Because you are going to hear some heavily gendered terms.
That is a critical point to establish right up front. Throughout this deep dive, you will hear us use archetypal terms drawn directly from the creator's world-building notes.
Specifically titles like the masculine father and the feminine mother.
Right. And it is vital for everyone listening to understand that the creator explicitly designed this as a cosmic mythological commentary on absolute forces of nature.
They are using these terms to describe the tension between rigid order and unpredictable chaos or flow.
Exactly. This is absolutely not an endorsement of real-world political ideologies.
No.
And it is not a commentary on real-world social gender hierarchies or the cultural debates we have today. Not at all. The creator is just using ancient archetypal language to give a mythic, emotional weight to the abstract concepts of creation and entropy.
And as always, our goal here is to impartially report on the content provided in these notes. We are not taking sides or endorsing any viewpoints, but simply conveying these massive ideas exactly as they are laid out in the original author's universe.
Right, just looking at the mechanics of the world building.
So with that framework in mind, let's look at the actual timeline. Our mission today is to take you on a journey from the absolute primordial beginning of time itself all the way to a gritty, terrifying, time zone-ruled dystopian future in the year 2666.
It is quite the journey.
It is. So looking at the very first page of these notes, there's a concept called the unity. What exactly was the state of existence before this universe even started?
Well, the creator describes the unity as a state of existence before time, before space, and crucially, before geometry.
Before geometry. That's a specific way to phrase it.
It is. Imagine a single, unfathomably dense consciousness. It was a perfect, pressurized equilibrium, where both that masculine force of structure known as on and the feminine flow of dissolution known as aura existed together.
So they were just one thing.
Exactly. They weren't two separate beings having a conversation. They were two opposing impulses breathing as one entity.
But looking at the descriptions here, that doesn't sound peaceful at all. It sounds agonizing. It's described almost like an unbearable claustrophobic tension.
Because it was. Think about the fundamental nature of those two forces. The masculine force, On, possessed an innate burning desire to expand.
To build things.
Right, to define boundaries, to build a shape that could be pointed to and named. He craved permanence.
But the feminine flow, Aura, had the exact opposite hunger.
Her impulse was toward total stillness, harmony, and the soft insistence that all shapes are temporary and must inevitably dissolve back into the oneness of the void.
So you have one impulse trying to build a sandcastle, and the other impulse is the ocean tide constantly washing it away before it can even take shape.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
That's a cosmic stalemate.
Yeah.
How does a universe actually get built out of that gridlock?
Through an act of profound cosmic violence.
Of course.
This event is documented in the lore as the Sundering.
The Sundering.
On realized he could never achieve his vision of a perfectly structured, permanent reality as long as he was inextricably bound to Aura's dissolving tide.
So what does he do?
He constructed a metaphysical shell of pure, unyielding law and essentially snapped the unity in two.
He's broke it.
He violently severed himself from the flow and sealed the feminine half away in a timeless, lightless void.
Wow.
And by doing this, he emerged as the sole, dominant, godlike being of the new cosmos. He names himself the Architect, or the Father, and the imprisoned, exiled feminine flow becomes known as the Mother.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because the Architect thinks he has won.
Oh, he absolutely thinks he's won.
He thinks he's completely solved the entropy problem. He's locked away the chaos, and now he can finally build his perfect, eternal geometric universe.
But he missed a massive detail.
The notes reveal that the sheer friction of that violent split, the trauma of the Sundering, created a third entity.
A byproduct.
Right, a byproduct that he is completely oblivious to.
Born from the wound of the unity is a being named Danica. She is referred to as the daughter, and she is the literal living incarnation of balance.
Because she was forged in the space between the split.
Exactly. She possesses the father's structural logic, but she's infused with the mother's heart, intuition, and flow.
And her positioning in the cosmos is brilliant. When the mother was sealed away, Danica slipped into a dimensional space called the Veiled Beyond.
Which is key to everything that happens next.
Because it means the father can't see her. He has no idea she even exists.
None whatsoever. And the logic behind his blindness is perfectly sound within the rules of this universe.
How so?
The Architect can only perceive things that adhere to his strict, rigid, geometric blueprints. Because Danica is a fusion of structure and unpredictable flow, she defies his mathematics.
She doesn't fit on the spreadsheet.
Right. She is the ultimate blind spot. She acts as this universe's true mother nature, a silent, hidden observer, ensuring that for every action of extreme, rigid order the father takes, there is a reaction of dissolving flow.
Think of it this way. Imagine a master clockmaker. He builds this massive, perfectly rigid, mathematically flawless clock.
Okay.
He is so proud of it. It's his masterpiece. But he is completely unaware that the ambient humidity in the room is slowly rusting the gears.
Ah, I like that.
In this universe, that humidity represents the mother's leaking influence and Danica's hidden hand.
Mm-hmm.
The clockmaker views this rust, this natural decay, as a horrifying design flaw. He's furious about it.
Naturally.
But he has no idea that if the gears didn't rest just a little bit, if there wasn't a tiny bit of give and friction, the entire machine would be so tightly wound that it would freeze up and shatter from its own rigid tension.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it perfectly captures the tragic flaw of the father in this world building.
Yeah, it really frames his whole motivation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the IP, the creator is making a very specific choice here. The Architect isn't inherently evil.
Right, he isn't a malicious villain twirling his mustache.
No. His tragedy is his absolute blinding obsession with perfection and permanence. He goes on to create the physical universe, the stars, the planets, the foundational structures.
But he is continually horrified to discover that everything he makes eventually breaks down.
Mountains erode, stars burn out, systems fail.
And he hates it.
He views this natural entropy as a catastrophic defect, a failure in his own divine design. He's completely unaware that his hidden daughter, Danica, is quietly maintaining cosmic balance by allowing things to end so that new things can begin.
It's such a brilliant foundation because it gives every single action in this universe a heavy philosophical weight.
It really does.
Every event is a tug of war between control and evolution. So the Architect has this massive, empty universe. Who does he build to guard it? Looking at the timeline, before he even thinks about humans or angels, he creates his first set of cosmic sentinels.
He creates what are known as the 13 Serpents.
Okay, 13 serpents.
And we shouldn't picture giant snakes slithering through space.
Right, the notes are very clear on that.
These were vast, majestic entities composed entirely of perfect geometry, celestial light, and absolute law. They are the original administrators of reality.
What was their job?
Their mandate was simple: patrol the stars and maintain the Father's creation in a state of eternal, unmoving stasis.
Unmoving stasis.
Their sole purpose was to ensure that nothing ever grew, nothing ever changed, and nothing ever evolved.
But wait, if they're just enforcing complete stillness, isn't that just death?
That is exactly how Danica views it from the Veiled Beyond.
Ah, right. She's watching this happen.
She sees this absolute stasis not as perfection, but as a slow, crystallized death. A universe that cannot change is essentially a corpse.
So she has to do something.
To force the universe to evolve, to break the Father's frozen system, Danica reaches out from the shadows and secretly interferes.
What does she do to the serpents?
She infects the 13 serpents with 3 forbidden concepts that the Father never programmed into them.
Which are?
Hunger, cunning, and the instinct for self-preservation.
Oh, man. Introducing those 3 traits into giant cosmic geometry monsters goes horribly wrong, doesn't it?
It fundamentally rewrites their nature. They cease to be passive, unfeeling enforcers of law and instantly become active, calculating predators.
That's terrifying.
Armed with vast intelligence and insatiable hunger and the instinct to survive at all costs, they begin to judge what deserves to exist and what is merely fuel.
Fuels for them to eat.
Yes, this triggers an apocalyptic event known in the lore as the Devouring. The serpents literally consumed half of the architect's pristine creation.
They just ate half the universe.
Basically, yes.
The architect must have been absolutely enraged. But I'm guessing, because of his massive ego, he refuses to admit that he'd made a mistake.
He is incapable of admitting a flaw in his design, and remember, he doesn't know Danica exists.
Right.
So who does he blame for this catastrophic failure? The mother.
Of course he does.
He assumes her corrupting, chaotic influence is somehow leaking from her prison and infecting his perfect guardians. This only hardens his resolve to keep her locked away forever.
But he still has to deal with the rogue serpents.
And because they are forged from his own divine essence, they are immortal. They cannot simply be deleted or unmade.
So he has to punish them. And this is where the creator of Devolutia pulls off one of the coolest world-building tricks I've seen in a long time. It changes how you look at the night sky. What exactly does he do to these serpents?
The Father resorts to a horrific, agonizing punishment. He physically captures 12 of the massive serpents, tears them across the cosmos, and pins their vast bodies to the firmament.
Just staples them to the sky?
He stretches them out across the sky, stripping them of their agency, and binds them as glowing celestial prisons. They become the Zodiac constellations.
That is incredibly dark. So in this universe, when you look up at a horoscope, you aren't just looking at an arbitrary collection of stars.
Yeah.
You are looking at a cosmic torture chamber. You are looking at imprisoned, screaming gods pinned to the void.
It is a phenomenal repurposing of real-world astrology. The creator didn't just stop at the visual either.
They went deeper into the psychology.
In this universe, the Father didn't just pin their bodies. He twisted their original perfect command templates into the psychological flaws that would later plague humanity.
Wait, really?
Yes. When a human exhibits one of these specific flaws, they are literally echoing the corrupted hunger of these ancient, tortured serpents hanging over their heads.
I have to give some examples from the notes because the psychological mapping here is just amazing.
It's very thorough.
Take Leonidas, which we know as Leo.
Yeah.
Its original cosmic command from the Father was sovereignty. But pinned to the sky and corrupted by hunger, that trait curdled into blinding pride.
Right.
Or cancerous, or cancer. Its original command was the protector, which collapsed into suffocating attachment.
That's a great example.
Ariestos, or Aries, went from the impulse to destructive spontaneity. Tauron, Taurus, went from the foundation to covetous stubbornness. Geminitis, Gemini, fractured from the duality into deceptive multiplicity. It's brilliant.
It goes on and on. Virgon becomes obsessive criticism. Libros becomes paralyzing indecision. Scorpus ferments into venomous resentment.
It grounds these ancient astrological archetypes in a deeply tragic, cosmic horror narrative.
And it sets up the Serpents as long-term antagonists who are filled with pure, unadulterated hatred for the systems of the Father.
Wait, you said he captured 12 of them, but earlier you said there were 13 Serpents. What happened to the 13th? Did it get away?
It did. The 13th Serpent is named Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer.
Okay, Ophiuchus.
And it didn't flee out into the stars where the Father could easily spot it. Instead, it slipped downward into the very seams of reality.
Because the stars are where the others got caught.
Right. Danica, acting from the shadows, helped hide it. She warped the geometric foundations deep beneath the architect's garden of stasis,
Which was his pristine central laboratory.
and created a recursive, pressurized, flooded labyrinth. She hid Ophiuchus deep within this lightless water, coiling the massive beast around 3 stones carved with the mother's raw runes of flow.
So you have the ultimate intelligent, hungry rebel hiding right under the floorboards of the Father's most perfect creation.
It's a massive threat just waiting there.
That is a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
But back up in the cosmos, the architect has a massive logistical problem. His first set of biological thinking guardians went rogue and ate half his stuff. He needs a backup plan.
He definitely does.
How does a control freak rebound from that level of failure?
By entirely abandoning the concept of biological life or independent thought.
That tracks.
He decides to build a new class of guardians, leading to the creation of the Inviolate. In traditional mythologies, we would call these beings angels.
Right, angels.
But Devolutia reimagines them brilliantly to fit this theme of rigid structure. The architect forges the Arch-Inviolate directly from the raw mathematics of creation, carving them from the foundation stones of reality itself.
The descriptions of these beings are terrifying.
Yeah.
The source material calls them the faceless chisel.
Yes.
They are massive, ranging from 15 to 30 feet tall and made entirely of white granite and polished silver. They don't have human faces.
No features at all.
They have chiseled, shifting architectural visages that never blink, never sweat, and never tire. And their wings. They aren't soft feathers. They are vast structural planes of radiant light and shifting geometry.
They are imposing.
When they land, the text says, it's not like a bird taking flight. It's like a cathedral coming to stand where absolutely nothing stood before.
They are the literal physical manifestation of divine law. They do not serve out of love, compassion, or a sense of morality.
I don't even know what those are.
They have no concept of those things. They exist purely as structural reinforcement. To stand before an Arch-Inviolate is to stand before the absolute no of the Father. They are living, breathing walls.
And their purpose is absolute containment.
Exactly.
The notes mention a specific subset of these beings called the Soul Inviolate. How do they tie into humanity?
This is how the Father exerts micro-control over the human population.
Right.
Every single time a human is born under the Father's rights, a Soul Inviolate crystallizes and wraps its essence around the infant soul. It creates what is called the silver tether.
The silver tether.
It's essentially a spiritual tracking umbilical cord that connects the human soul directly to the Father's celestial processing center.
It sounds like a spiritual ankle monitor.
That's a very apt way to describe it. The tether protects the soul from the mother's chaos, but it also traps it. It turns the sovereign human soul into a system asset that cannot be reclaimed by the mother's flow or Danica's balance.
So it's property.
When the human body dies, that tether mechanically pulls the soul straight up to the architect's heaven.
But the notes have a massive section on what happens if that system fails.
It is a flawed system, after all.
What happens if that tether snaps before the human dies? Say, through a moment of severe psychological trauma, an act of forbidden magic, or maybe Danica quietly snipping it from the shadows. What happens to the angel?
This is where the world building shifts from cosmic fantasy into profound psychological horror.
It really does.
If the tether snaps, the Soul Inviolate is orphaned. It loses its purpose, its coordinate, its guiding law. But because it is made of immortal stone, it doesn't die.
Right.
It becomes what the lore calls a wanderer, a broken, fallen angel. But not fallen in the Miltonian sense?
Like Lucifer rebelling out of pride and a desire to rule.
Exactly. In Devolutia, a fallen angel is like a complex machine that has lost its programming and is slowly consumed by an emotion it was never built to process.
Which is grief.
Grief.
I read this section detailing the psychology of a wanderer, and it gave me chills. It passes through 3 sacred states of grief.
Let's walk through those.
The first stage is called the solitary one. The angel becomes invisible to the mortal eye, and this massive 30-foot-tall stone figure simply dwells in the exact physical location where the tether snapped.
Just frozen there.
It refuses to leave.
Yeah.
It just endlessly, silently paces in a circle around the empty space where its human soul used to be, vibrating with a heavy, crushing sorrow. It can stay locked in this loop for centuries.
Just picture the atmospheric tension of that. Imagine you are walking through an old abandoned house or a battlefield.
Okay.
You suddenly feel this intense, crushing weight in your chest, a sorrow that brings you to your knees. You can't see it, but you are standing in the path of a massive, invisible statue of weathered white granite, endlessly pacing, mourning a system failure it cannot comprehend.
It is such a chilling, evocative image of institutional breakdown.
It really is. And the second stage is the sorrowful of heart, where the wanderer tries to mend reality, accidentally causing lunar omens and heavy, unnatural silences in the environment.
And finally, if it processes its grief, it reaches the wise in mind.
Yes, it accepts the impermanence of existence, finally understands the cosmic truth of the mother, and chooses to dissolve its own stone form, returning to the flow.
However, there is a terrifying alternative.
There is always a terrifying alternative in this lore.
What if the wanderer refuses to accept the loss? What if it decides it will never stop looking for its lost human soul, no matter the cost?
If a wanderer makes that choice, it can seek out the hidden runes of Danica in the ruins of the flooded labyrinth.
Down where the 13th Serpent is.
Yes. If it finds them, it undergoes a horrific, irreversible mutation. It sacrifices one of its architectural eyes to gain the cosmic, rule-breaking sight of the veiled beyond. The text calls this ritual the Odin Protocol.
Pulling that reference to Odin sacrificing an eye at the Well of Mimir for cosmic knowledge is such a great mythic touch. But what does it turn into?
It returns as a harbinger.
A harbinger.
It ceases to be an entity of grief and becomes a terrifying, one-eyed, multi-winged soul reaper. It no longer guards, it hunts.
That's a huge shift.
A harbinger will systematically slaughter thousands of humans, ripping through the veil, just to find the one specific soul signature it lost. And as they consume souls to power their search, they grow larger, more complex, and more unstable.
So they just snowball.
If left completely unchecked, a harbinger will trigger Ragnarok, a total, localized systemic collapse of the Father's Law.
So if you have giant, invisible, grieving stone monuments pacing around and occasionally mutating into one-eyed reapers that slaughter towns, eventually humanity is going to notice the cracks in the Father's perfect system, right?
You would think so.
How does the architect cover up his mistakes?
That brings us to his propaganda arm, the Historia.
The Historia.
The architect is obsessed with his own infallibility. He cannot allow humanity to understand the true nature of the universe, the trauma of the Sundering, the existence of the mother, or the tragic failures of his Inviolates. So he empowers the Historia.
They are his scribes, but functionally they act as his censorship agency.
Correct.
They write the history books to ensure the Father always looks like the Savior. They carve the Father's absolute laws into the tablets. But what's fascinating is how they explain away the decay and the monsters. If the Father's perfect, why is there pain?
Right, they have to answer that question.
They create what the notes call the mask of the adversary. They literally manufacture a scapegoat.
Precisely. They need a figure to blame for the natural entropy of the universe. So they take one of the High Inviolates, a guardian named Luceron, whom we will discuss in depth shortly, and they brand him as the devil.
Just a total fabrication.
They weave an elaborate lie that this devil is responsible for the universe's decay, completely hiding the fact that decay is just the natural, necessary flow of the mother.
It's a profound exploration of institutional control and rewriting history. They wipe away the truth of feminine intuition and natural evolution, brand it as chaotic evil, and elevate the sterile geometry of the Father as the only acceptable divine truth.
It's gaslighting on a cosmic planetary scale.
It is, which perfectly sets the stage to discuss the victims of that gaslighting humanity itself. Why did the architect create humans in the first place? What purpose do we serve in this massive, unyielding machine?
From what I can tell looking at these timelines, it all comes back to his obsession with defeating decay. The architect realized that everything he built from physical matter, mountains, stars, biological forms eventually broke down. The mother's influence was inescapable in the physical realm.
He couldn't keep her out completely.
To bypass this, to truly cheat nature, the Father did something unprecedented. He reached into his own pure masculine essence and tore off a fragment. That indestructible fragment became the immortal human soul.
It was his ultimate workaround.
A piece of himself that could not be destroyed by time, rust, or the mother's flow. And to house these immortal souls, once their temporary physical bodies died, he built the Eternal Sanctuary, which is this lore's version of heaven.
And it is a sterile, perfect, unchanging realm where souls are cataloged and stored forever.
Exactly.
But he faced a logistical problem. To populate this massive sanctuary, he needed to produce more souls. He couldn't just keep tearing off pieces of himself.
He'd run out of himself.
Exactly. So he created the first man, Adamir, as a perfect, obedient, masculine vessel. But Adamir alone could not generate new soul fragments. He needed a mechanism for reproduction. So the architect took a piece of Adamir's structure and fashioned Evara, the first woman.
The lore here is incredibly specific, and it is brutally tragic. The architect did not create Evara to be a sovereign person.
No, he didn't.
He did not grant her an independent soul. He created her purely as a subservient utility.
That's a rough phrase. Subservient utility.
She was designed to be a factory for continuation. Her existence was entirely derived from Adamir's structure, meant only to serve his needs and generate more skins, more bodies to house the father's immortal sparks.
It's a really dark origin that obviously mirrors historical patriarchal structures, but elevated to a hard cosmological law.
Very much so.
Ivara is essentially a prisoner in a perfectly ordered cage without even the ownership of her own spirit. And the architect, to ensure Adamir maintained absolute dominion over this system, gave him a very specific tool. He granted Adamir the first magic system wizardry, known formally as the Liturgy of the Spark.
The magic systems in Devolutia are some of the most thematic I've ever analyzed. They aren't just tools to shoot fireballs.
No, they are deep psychological reflections of the forces at play.
Wizardry is the father's magic. It is rigid, structured, incantation-based, and heavily bureaucratic. But the cost is devastating. It draws power directly from the user's immortal soul. It's called soul burn.
Soul burn.
Every single time a wizard casts a spell to assert control over reality, they are literally incinerating a piece of their own identity.
The notes detail the consequences, and it's called Hollowization. It happens in 3 stages.
Let's hear them.
First is the fray, where the user experiences minor memory loss, cold extremities, and a dulling of taste. Then comes the gray, which is a total loss of emotional empathy, and the user's skin actually turns ash-colored. And finally, the hollow, where the soul spark is entirely extinguished. The skin remains, completely functional, but the self is completely gone.
It's a terrifying metaphor for toxic ambition. Think about modern corporate burnout.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like.
It's like someone sacrificing their empathy, ignoring their family, and destroying their health just to climb the corporate ladder and exert control over others. They keep burning themselves up to assert dominance until they reach the absolute top and realize there is nothing left inside them.
Just a hollow shell and a tailored suit.
That is exactly what wizardry is in this universe. It is the willingness to destroy one's own internal self purely to force the external world to obey your rules.
But Evara had no access to this magic. She lived in silent, total oppression. She was a body without a sovereign soul, feeling the unnatural, suffocating rigidity of the Garden of Stasis.
And she couldn't stand it.
In her despair, knowing the Father would never listen to her, she didn't pray to the light. She sat in the absolute night, put her hands in the dirt, and prayed to the shadows. She prayed to the faint, dormant pulse of the feminine flow she could feel vibrating beneath the earth.
And who is listening in the shadows? Danica. Danica hears this plea from the veiled beyond, and she responds by growing the Tree of Flux, the Tree of Knowing. But she needs a messenger to guide Evara to it. Remember the 13th serpent, Ophiuchus, hiding in the flooded labyrinth directly beneath the garden?
Right, the ultimate rebel under the floorboards.
Exactly. Ophiuchus acts as Danica's voice. It rises through the geometric seams of the garden and speaks to Evara. And here is where the creator beautifully subverts the Genesis myth.
The serpent doesn't tempt her with malicious lies or promises of godhood.
No. It tells her the devastating truth. You were not made to serve. You were made to awaken.
Guided by the serpent, Evara eats the fruit of the Tree of Flux. And this act completely ignites her. She becomes the first witch. She gains access to a completely different, opposing system of magic witchcraft, or the flux draw.
Unlike wizardry, which burns the internal soul to enforce order, witchcraft draws power from the external natural order. It taps into Danica's raw components in the environment.
Right. It doesn't burn the user up.
And crucially, it is not fueled by memorized incantations. It is fueled by emotional trauma and deep intuition.
I love how the source material lays out the specific lineages of Witchcraft, showing how they were born directly from the different traumas Evara suffered under Adamir's control.
The specifics are great.
Her deep fear birthed seers, who navigate time threads to avoid danger. Her rage birthed X-casters, who manipulate destructive energy to fight back. Her sorrow birthed necromancers, seeking comfort from the dead. Her hope birthed healers, and her defiance birthed elementalists.
It frames witchcraft as an intuitive, feminine force born directly out of suppression. It alters the soul, accelerates desire, and completely destabilizes the father's certainty.
And that's a problem for him.
A huge problem. By awakening to this power, Evara infused her essence with the feminine flow. The architect, sensing this massive, chaotic corruption blooming inside his perfect laboratory, immediately casts Adamir and Evara out of the Garden of Stasis and into the harsh mortal world.
Which sets off a chain reaction that changes the entire planet. Let's look at the event the notes call the Severance.
Okay.
Evara is out in the mortal world, but she is still metaphysically bound to Adamir. Her existence is still derived from his structure. She is still tethered to the architect's absolute light. She decides she has had enough. She decides to break the bond permanently.
This act is known as the first divorce. It is the first time the feminine principle acts without permission on a global, catastrophic scale. But there's a problem.
What does she need to do?
To perform the severance ritual, Evara needed to completely block out the architect's rigid, penetrating light. She needed total darkness. To achieve this, she used her newfound elemental power to reach into the cosmos, pulling reflective matter from the heavens and drawing it together into a massive stabilizing mass.
She literally builds the moon.
She builds the moon.
Imagine you're living in this world, and you look up at the night sky. You aren't just seeing a rock caught in a gravitational pull. You're looking at the literal, physical shield Evara built to block out the architect's rigid control. It changes how you view everything in the sky.
It does.
And when the moon passes in front of the Father's light, it creates the first solar eclipse. In that sudden, unprecedented darkness, Evara violently rips her essence away from the masculine order.
And in that moment of absolute defiance, the mother acts directly from her void. She reaches through the darkness and grants Evara a sovereign, independent, feminine soul.
But Evara's rebellion doesn't stop there.
No. During the eclipse, utilizing her connection with the 13th Serpent and the Hidden Labyrinth, she summons the raw, unedited feminine flow directly into the physical realm. This power erupts from beneath the Earth's crust as a massive, forceful deluge. This is the Great Flood.
And here we have another brilliant subversion. How does Devolutia reimagine the Great Flood? In biblical terms, the flood is God punishing a wicked, sinful humanity by wiping the slate clean. But here, it's the exact opposite.
Yes, the architect's world before the flood was a sterile, closed-loop machine. Animals hunted and died in repeating cycles without purpose or adaptation. Plants were fixed, plastic-like forms that didn't drop seeds or grow. Water gathered in perfectly still, stagnant basins.
Like a museum diorama.
Exactly. The Great Flood was the feminine flow washing away that sterility. It eroded the father's rigid structures, cutting through the geometric rock of his ordered world, and drowned the stagnant breath of masculine life.
It wasn't destruction, it was circulation. It was life violently breaking into a sterile laboratory, because when the waters finally receded, the world was completely transformed.
It wasn't the same place anymore.
The mother's essence was permanently mixed into the soil, the air, and the tides. Barren, crystallized deserts turned into lush, chaotic oases. Plants began to bud, flower, and drop seeds. Animals evolved. Life could duplicate and adapt independently, relying on intuition rather than waiting for the Father's command.
This era is known as the first blooming. It is the birth of Mother Nature. It is the introduction of seasons, decay, and evolution. And the irony is palpable.
Oh, the architect's reaction is so good.
The architect looked down at this lush, green, thriving, chaotic world and, in his boundless arrogance, believed it was his own triumph. He believed his creation had finally perfected itself. He's completely oblivious to the fact that the beauty he admired was actually the result of the feminine flow returning to the physical realm and breaking his absolute control.
But the introduction of the mother's flow into a system designed by the Father creates terrifying friction. The world is evolving, biology is adapting, but the Father's immortal souls are still trapped inside their rigid, indestructible geometry.
And when those two opposing rule sets crash into each other, the fallout is horrifying. Let's look at the consequences, starting with Evara's children.
Right. Out in the blooming mortal world, Ivara and Adamir eventually have two sons. Avel, who is conceived under a strict ritual of marriage.
A bureaucratic ritual, Adamir, designed to ensure the father's blessing and maintain masculine dominion over the feminine soul.
So Avel is perfect, pure, static, and completely aligned with the father. But their other son, Kale, is conceived in a moment of passion and defiance without the father's permission. Kale's infused with Ivara's secret flux. He is wild, chaotic, and unblessed.
And Kale feels the crushing weight of the father's rejection and Adamir's blatant favoritism toward Avel. Consumed by jealousy and emotional instability, Kale lures Avel into a field and murders him.
It is the first act of soul violence. And reading the notes, this creates a massive cosmological crisis for the architect. Why?
Because of the architect's own rules. He built the human soul to be immortal. It is a fragment of his own essence. It literally cannot be unmade, erased, or deleted from existence.
But Kale's soul is now deeply corrupted by the trauma of murder.
The architect cannot allow a corrupted, traumatized soul into the pristine, mathematical purity of his eternal sanctuary, but he also cannot destroy it. He has a piece of immortal corruption on his hands with nowhere to put it.
It's a literal garbage disposal problem.
Yeah.
So, out of pure bureaucratic necessity, he has to carve a new realm out of the void, a quarantine zone, a cosmic trash can. He creates the Abyss, which is this lore's version of hell.
It's fascinating because it completely subverts the religious idea of hell. Hell was never intended as a place of divine punishment or moral judgment in this universe. It wasn't built to torture the wicked.
It was just a pressure valve.
A containment pit created simply because the architect's perfect system had a fatal flaw he refused to acknowledge. And to guard this terrible pit, he appoints one of his most loyal high inviolates, Luceron.
Oh, the tragedy of Luceron. He doesn't just get assigned a bad post. His fellow arch-inviolates physically mutilate and flay him, stripping away his radiant geometry to brand him as a beast fitting for the dark.
They ruin him.
He is left mangled and alone in the lightless void of the abyss. And the text describes this beautiful, heartbreaking moment. Luceron doesn't scream in anger. He feels. For the first time, an inviolate feels. A single tear rolls down his jagged obsidian face and falls to the soil of the abyss.
And remember, the father's inviolates are meant to be emotionless stone. A tear is a manifestation of the mother's flow.
Right.
Because the father cannot perceive the mother or anything associated with her flow, he is completely blind to the frequency of grief. That tear is an invisible ghost to him. But the mother feels it from her prison. When the tear hits the soil, the mother reaches through the dimensional seams of the abyss, cradles Luceron's fractured essence, and re-architects him.
He transforms into Lucia. He becomes the father's absolute nightmare, a corrupted angel empowered by the mother. And under Lucia's rule, hell rebels. It stops being a passive, miserable prison and becomes a transactional marketplace, a realm of contracts where souls are rewritten through desire rather than just contained.
This explains the concept of sin cities that appear much later in the timeline places on Earth, where the veil between realms is thin, and desperate humans can sign away their souls for a year of absolute bliss, or hunters can sign 10-year contracts to gain supernatural powers to fight monsters. Hell actively empowers humans to disrupt the Father's rigid systems by offering them choices the Father denies them.
It's incredible world building. But while hell is being formed, things on Earth are getting even worse for Ivara. Adamir, enraged by the Severance and viewing her newfound autonomy as a direct violation of divine law, becomes the first hunter. He tracks her down in the dead of winter and strikes her down with a silver blade.
The environmental storytelling in these notes is so rich. When Ivara dies, her final breath refuses to disperse in the freezing air. It settles on the clear, crystal ground. Her blood seeps into the earth. And Adamir's silver blade, forged in the pure light of the architect, is steeped in her blood.
The feminine flow in her blood reacts violently with the masculine purity of the silver. By dawn, the blade has darkened and reddened. It becomes iron. It's the first corrupted metal. And from that day forward, iron will forever disrupt the feminine flow because it carries the physical memory of her violation. Witches cannot cast magic near it. And the crystal earth beneath her, stained by her blood, transforms into salt.
Adamir uses this newly formed salt to perform the first binding ritual, desperately trying to contain the chaotic echo of her spirit. This establishes the universal supernatural laws of Devolutia. Salt remembers and binds trauma. Iron disrupts the flow.
And from Avara's lingering, frozen final breath, the first vengeful spirit is born. Ghosts in this universe aren't just lingering souls. They are literal echoes of unresolved violence, trauma repeating itself endlessly like a broken record.
But Ivara's death doesn't end there. The lore hints that her essence reforms, or she has multiple deaths across history that seed the world with different breeds of monsters.
Let's talk about the vampires and werewolves.
For instance, Adamir sends human hunters after her, and they corner her in a pitch-black cave, driving a wooden stake through her heart. The feminine death magic in her blood curses the hunters as they strike the blow, and they emerge from the cave permanently sensitive to the Father's light, thirsting for blood to replenish the flow they stole. They become the first vampiric.
And in another instance, a blacksmith unleashes werewolves on her under the light of a full moon. They tear her apart and devour her heart. The blacksmith, seeking to erase her completely, casts her remains into molten silver. One moon cycle later, the blacksmith and the wolves mutate, their biology permanently bound to her lunar magic. They become the lunar rot, the first werewolves.
Here's the massive problem this creates for the architect. How do you solve the problem of monsters in a perfectly designed universe? Because the vampires and werewolves were originally human, meaning they inherited the immortal spark of the human soul.
So they can't die.
If a hunter kills a vampire, its essence just retreats to the shadows and reforms. They are a permanent, immortal stain on the architect's geometry. They can't be deleted.
To solve this, the architect and Adamir must construct yet another massive containment realm. They build the Oubliette of flesh, which serves as Purgatory, but again, completely subverting Catholic dogma. It's not a place of spiritual cleansing where souls burn off their sins to reach heaven.
It is a biological quarantine zone.
It is designed as a massive living stomach where immortal monsters are trapped, hunting and devouring each other endlessly in a gray, sunless wasteland, unable to reform on Earth and bother humanity.
But Adamir, ever the paranoid tactician, insists on building a failsafe. He secretly builds a hidden backdoor in the architecture of Purgatory. He wants a way to pull monsters back to Earth if he ever needs a terrifying army to hunt down Evara's magically gifted descendants.
And that backdoor is the fatal flaw that dooms the entire future of humanity. Let's fast forward to the era that gives the IP its name. How to get a Devolutia 2666.
We have to jump ahead to the year 2080. This era is known as the Fall. For millennia, the architect system has been straining under the weight of human history. Billions of souls of the dead have been ascending to the eternal sanctuary. But eventually, the architect's rigid systems can no longer process the sheer volume of human complexity. He withdraws entirely. The sanctuary seals its gates.
Heaven is literally closed for business.
Precisely. With the sanctuary sealed, human souls have nowhere to go when they die. They begin to backlog in the veil, the dimensional transit layer between Earth and heaven. The veil becomes overcrowded with billions of trapped, panicking spirits.
The immense metaphysical pressure of all these trapped souls literally cracks the borders of reality.
And who is waiting in the dark to exploit those cracks? The ancient, corrupted firstborn, the 13 serpents who have spent eons pinned to the sky or hiding in the labyrinth, mutating and learning how to consume complex systems.
They exploit the backdoor Adamir left in Purgatory. They invade Earth. But reading the notes, they don't arrive with armies of fire and brimstone. They seep in like bureaucratic oil.
They don't conquer humanity with explosions. They audit us. They occupy the planet and violently freeze human technological progress exactly where it was in 2080.
This brings us to the titular era 2666. Earth is no longer a planet of sovereign nations or independent governments. The Serpents view the globe not as a home, but as a flesh cycle, a planetary stomach, a massive feeding clock.
They completely reorganize the world into 24 meridian dominions, corresponding perfectly to the 24 global time zones.
I am obsessed with the details of these dominions. The names are so chilling. The resistance humans still use old geographical names like Old England or Old France, but the Serpents has stripped all culture away. They have a mythic name and a predatory name for every slice of the globe. Old England, sitting at UTC +0, was the first meridian, but its predatory name among the monsters is the flesh cycle. Old France is the iron slice.
Let's look at Old Australia. It is designated as the red meridian or the culling slice. It is completely dominated by massive, brutal arena complexes where human survival is broadcast across the globe as a blood sport spectacle to keep the populace docile.
It is an incredibly oppressive, highly bureaucratic dystopia. The Serpents sit at the very top of the hierarchy, rarely seen by human eyes, slowly devouring entire cultures and histories. Below them, they use the ancient monsters that were trapped in Purgatory to manage the day-to-day operations of the world.
Right. They essentially install the monsters as middle management. The vampiric aristocracy controls the massive megacities, managing the blood quotas and running the corporations. The abyss-born demons act as the ultimate accountants and administrators, enforcing soul contracts and maintaining a net of psychic surveillance over the population.
And the werewolves, the lunar rot, patrol the transit corridors in the overgrown wildlands, acting as relentless bloodhounds hunting down anyone who tries to escape the cities.
And what about humanity? What is daily life like? In 2666, humans exist in two horrifying binary states. You are either colonized or feral.
If you are colonized, you are essentially branded livestock with a studio apartment. You live in heavily monitored, brutalist cities. You work in the massive factories, maintain the failing power grids, and most importantly, provide regular blood donations and offspring to meet the vampiric quotas.
You wake up to shift bells, you stand in gray ration lines, and your only entertainment is watching the arena broadcasts from the Red Meridian. You are cattle with housing, and you know it.
And if you refuse that life, you are feral. You live illegally beyond the walls of the colonies, you hide in the ruined, overgrown cities of the old world, scavenge for survival, and you are relentlessly hunted by werewolf packs and entities called Munnoters, psychic enforcers that can literally smell fear over miles. The night entirely belongs to the monsters. If you are feral, you are free, but you are always prey.
But the Serpents aren't satisfied with just ruling Earth. They have an endgame. They know the Mother's chaotic influence is still trapped deep in Earth's soil. They know Danica is out there somewhere in the veil beyond. They fear the gospel of balance, which are whispered rumors among the feral humans of a prophecy that balance will eventually be restored.
To sever humanity from the feminine flow forever, to create a perfect, enclosed system of feeding, the Serpents initiate the Mars Exodus.
This is the ultimate terrifying goal of the 2666 era. Publicly, the Exodus is sold to the colonized humans as salvation, a lottery ticket. Humanity's chance to leave the monster-infested Earth and begin anew on a pristine, gleaming world.
In reality, it is the ultimate containment strategy. Mars will become a sterile breeding world, a massive human farm entirely free of Earth's messy history, its unpredictable magic, and its potential for rebellion.
And the cruelty of how they build it is staggering. The Serpents force uncopyables. These are rare humans with complex, imaginative minds that cannot be cloned or replicated by Serpent technology to design the off-world infrastructure. They are forcing the brightest minds of humanity to build their own species' permanent prison. Once Mars is operational and the human cattle are moved, Earth will simply be consumed entirely by the Serpents.
Think about the absolute suffocating terror of living in that reality.
Yeah.
Imagine waking up in your own city, but it's now just designated as the Iron Slice. You know every drop of your blood is tracked by an abyss-born accountant on a soul ledger. You know your ultimate destiny, your reward for compliance, is to be shipped to a sterile, airless dome on Mars to be farmed for eternity.
It is a stunningly bleak contrast to the high-concept cosmic history we discussed earlier. It brings the grand mythology down to a visceral human level of suffering.
It is unbearably bleak. But the overarching theme of Devolutia, the core thesis of this entire world-building project, is that extreme imbalance cannot last forever. A pendulum swung that far into absolute control must eventually swing back. The universe always course corrects. Which brings us to the final act of the cosmology we have in these notes, the Revelation era and the three gods of balance. How does the Father's reign finally end?
It ends not with a massive battle, but with exhaustion. After centuries of the sanctuary being sealed, after eons of fighting the natural entropy of the universe, the architect's power finally completely dissolves. The rigid mathematical structure holding the universe together simply fails. And when the Father's absolute law breaks, the Mother's ancient prison shatters. The feminine flow is reunited with the world, rushing back into reality unopposed for the first time since the Sundering.
The visual the Creator uses to mark this cosmic shift is absolutely breathtaking. A new celestial body suddenly appears in the solar system. It's called the ninth star. But it doesn't emit light. It has no mass. It exerts no gravitational pull. It cannot be measured by any of the Serpent's instruments. Yet it acts as a massive metaphysical sponge, siphoning away 90% of the sun's harsh, penetrating light.
The world is plunged into what the lore calls negative light. It's a permanent, bruised violet twilight. And over the ensuing centuries, Earth's plant life doesn't die from the lack of sunlight. It mutates. Chlorophyll fails, and photosynthesis adapts to the new magical frequency. Every forest, every jungle, every single blade of grass on Earth turns entirely purple. It is Devolutia's signature environmental aesthetic. The world doesn't end. It radically reconfigures.
But this reconfiguration presents a fatal problem, doesn't it? With the father gone and the mother completely unopposed, creation begins to dissolve way too quickly. Without the rigid framework of the masculine force to hold things together, structures soften, boundaries blur, and individual identity weakens. The entire universe is rapidly heading toward a total dissolution, threatening to melt back into the primordial unity where we started.
This is the ultimate crisis for Danica. She is balance incarnate. She has spent eons quietly rusting the father's gears to keep the universe from freezing solid. But now, with the father gone, the universe is melting. And because Danica only exists as the tension between structure and flow, she realizes that without the father's resistance, she's going to lose her form and fade away entirely.
So, looking at these final notes,
Yeah.
what does she do? Does she try to take the father's throne and rule?
No, because she understands that to rule is to exert dominance, which immediately creates imbalance. Danica foresees her own demise and realizes that to save existence, she must step out of the shadows and perform one final, massive act of creation. She sacrifices her unified consciousness. She willingly shatters herself to forge 3 new gods, 3 functional principles to replace the lost counterweight of the father.
She creates the Warden of Continuance, tasked with maintaining memory, history, and identity so that the universe doesn't vanish into the mother's amnesiac flow. She creates the Harbinger of Change, ensuring the world continues to evolve through disruption rather than rotting into stagnation. And she creates the Keeper of Thresholds, managing the passage of death, rebirth, and the complicated borders across the shattered veil.
It is a masterful, poignant conclusion to the mythos. The cyclical nature of this universe is profound. It begins with a violent, selfish rupture by the father that creates a flawed, oppressive, dualistic cosmology. And it ends with a desperate, beautiful, selfless sacrifice by the hidden daughter, forging a new, complex pantheon designed not to rule humanity, but simply to maintain the equilibrium necessary for life to exist.
Wow. We have covered a staggering amount of ground today, from a single unified consciousness splitting into warring cosmic forces, to the desperate creation of immortal souls to cheat death. We've traced the tragic origins of stone angels, vampires, and werewolves, framing them not as evil creatures, but as tragic glitches in a broken bureaucratic system. And we've walked through the dark, time zone-ruled dystopia of 2666, ending under the purple twilight of a massless star.
The relevance of this material cannot be overstated for anyone interested in writing, game design, or world building. This creator has taken incredibly familiar archetypes, Adam and Eve, the Zodiac, fallen angels, the biblical flood, and completely stripped them of their traditional moral baggage. By injecting them with a rigorous, interconnected structural logic based entirely on the tension between order and flow, they have forged a universe that feels ancient, inevitable, and utterly original. Every monster has an ecological reason to exist. Every magic system carries a devastating psychological cost. It is a brilliant architecture of imagination.
It really is a triumph of concept development. And before we go, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought directly inspired by Danica's ultimate sacrifice. Think about her final act, splitting herself into 3 distinct gods just to maintain the reality of the world. She understood that true balance requires both the capacity to build structures and the willingness to let those structures dissolve when they no longer serve us. If balance requires both creation and destruction, structure and flow, in your own life, when you feel totally stuck, are you clinging too tightly to the architect's rigid control? Are you desperately trying to maintain a perfect system, a job, a habit, a relationship that is actually suffocating you? Or, conversely, are you terrified to let the mother's unpredictable flow wash away what isn't working anymore? Maybe, just maybe, we all need a little Devolutia to finally evolve.
A profound question to end on. It takes courage to embrace the necessary decay of the old to make way for the new.
Thank you so much for joining us on this massive deep dive into the evolving world of Devolutia 2666. It's been a wild ride through the cosmos and the calendar. Keep exploring, keep questioning the rigid structures around you, and as always, stay curious,